Today's daf is Masechta Baba Kamma Daf Nun Beis. We're going to begin from Daf Nun Aleph Amid Beis, the last line over here. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, "Hamoicha bayis lechavere." Someone sells a house to his friend. So we're talking about how does the purchaser acquire the house. So Kevin Shemaso loy mafteach, since the seller gave him over the keys to the house, Kana, the purchaser, acquired the house. So the Gemara asks a question, Hey Chidami, how's that possible? How did the kinyan, the acquisition, happen? Iba kaspa, if the purchaser gave over money to purchase the house. So what do you need the keys for? Likne bekaspa, he acquired it with giving over the money. Chazaka, if he made an acquisition by doing repairs on the house, so likne bechazaka, then he acquired the house by doing repairs on the house, showing ownership of the house. So what does the keys have to do with it? Answers the Gemara, li'olam, really we're talking about bechazaka, that the purchaser is about to do repairs on the house. He's going to fix a fence around the house, supposedly. Now, really, in order to acquire the house, the seller has to be present while the purchaser does these repairs. But by giving over the keys, he's saying, in effect, he tells him, do your repairs, do your acquisition, and acquire the house. And therefore, I don't have to be present when these repairs are done. So when does he give him the right to do that? The Kevin since he gave him the keys, command the Amalei, as if he said, Lake Chazek B'knei Dami. It's as if he said, go and make an acquisition, do repairs, strengthen the house, and you acquire the house. I don't have to be present when you're doing these repairs. And that's the essence of what this giving over the keys effectuates. Amar Shlakish Mishum Rabbiani. Shlakish said in the name of Rabbiani, a person selling an entire flock of sheep to his friend. As soon as you give him this thing called mashkichus, kana, he acquired the entire flocks of sheep. So the Gemara says, Hey Chadami, what are we talking about? How did he acquire the sheep? If he already drew the sheep into his, let's say, domain, let him acquire the sheep to his with Mashiach, drawing it to you, because that's where you acquire animals, with Mashiach. If the guy gave over the animals, let's say he lifted each animal and gave it over to the purchaser, then the purchaser acquired it with the receiving of the animals. What is this mashkichis, which we're going to explain what this is, have anything to do with the kinyan? Answers the Gemara, really, he wants to draw all each one of those animals to him. So the seller is saying to the purchaser, Lech mishoich uknei, you're going to draw these animals to your property and you're going to acquire it. But I don't have to be present when that happens. As soon as the seller gives him the mashkichas, and this mashkichas is an instrument that helps the animals go in a certain directions. So as soon as he said that, so it's similar to the keys. Command the Omalei Lech Mishoy Uknei Dami. It's as if he told the purchaser, go, draw the animals to you, and you'll acquire the animals because once you give over the mashkichas, the seller doesn't have to be present when you're doing the mashicha. My mashkichas, what is a mashkichas? Answers the Gemara, Hocha Targima, in Baval, they translated karkashta is a bell, which is a certain bell that only this flock understands the sound of that bell. And that bell has the ability to gather the flock and send it in a certain direction. So as soon as the seller gave over this karkashta, or what's called mashkichas in the Gemara, then automatically the purchaser can make the kinyan even if the seller is not present. Rabbi Yaakov says, "Iza the azla, it's the goat, the azla breish edra. It's similar. It's a goat that leads. There's one goat that's has a certain personality that heads the rest of the flock. So as soon as the purchaser takes possession of that goat that's going to lead the flock, so then automatically he has a right to acquire and solidify the acquisition anytime he wants, even if the seller is not present, because basically the seller gave him over the keys to how to lead the flock. Now, we know that Rabbi Yaakov just explained that mashkuches is an iza, is a goat that leads the flock. So the Gemara says like an Agarata piece, Kididarish Ahi Galila Alei Rav Chizda. This one man from Galil made a speech to Rav Chizda and explained to him, Kadrog is raya al ono, when a shepherd is angry at his flock, Avilinagada Samusa, he makes the leading goat as a blind person. So when that leading goat falls into a pit, the rest of the flock will follow through. So he was meramis to this Rav Chizda that sometimes when God is angry at us, he will make leaders leading Klal Yisrael who are blind, and the rest of Klal Yisrael follows through. So that is the remez of what a karkishta is and how it pertains to a leader of a flock. Okay, the Mishnah begins. The Mishnah is talking about bar. You have a bar that belongs to two parties, right? Two shutfim own a bar. Two partners own a bar. Kisaho Rishain, the first one came and covered the bar. And the second one came, the second owner of the bar, and he said he found that he passed by the pit, and he saw that it's uncovered, the like he saw, and he didn't cover it. So the first one covered it. The second one came by and found it uncovered. So if some damage happens to it, Hasheni Chayev, only the second partner is obligated to pay, not the first partner, because he was not negligent. Now the Mishnah says, if you cover a pit, kiso kura'u, if you cover a pit appropriately, and a shar and a chamar died, so you did your share by covering it properly, potter, you're not obligated to pay. Like kisahu kura'u, but if you didn't cover it properly, you put a flimsy cover, and then a shar and a chamar fell into that pit and died, so you didn't cover it properly, so you were negligent. You're obligated to pay. Now the Mishnah says, man has a pit and he hired a worker to go into the pit and expand it, and he was making noise, like, drilling noise, jackhammer noise, and there was an animal at the edge of the pit, and so and he was so frightened by the noise, he fell into the pit. He fell into the pit from the sound of the drilling, of the digging, chayev, then the owner of the pit is obligated to pay, not the guy doing the drilling. Because the guy doing the drilling is only a cause. The real main part of the damages belong to the owner of the pit. La'acharov, but what happens if the person flipped over backwards, the animal flipped over backwards, we call hakriya, from the sound of the drilling, from the sound of the digging, potter, then even the owner of the pit is not obligated to pay. We'll see more about this in the Gemara. Now the Mishnah teaches you another din. A shar carrying, let's say, pots, and the shar fell in and he broke all the pots. Chamar, a donkey, came in, v'kelev, also carrying pots. V'niskaru, or let's say the donkey had special clothing, or he was carrying clothing, and when he fell into the pit, all that clothing got ripped. So the owner of the pit is chayav al behema upata al hakelim. He's obligated to pay for the animal, and you're not obligated to pay for the kelim, for the non-live objects, because the Torah only said that you're obligated to pay for making a pit only if an animal falls into the pit, nothing else. You're not obligated to pay for damages, for any damages occurred by this pit. Now the Mishnah says, and this is the biggest chiddush of the Mishnah, that when do we say that any animal falls into a pit? Normally, animals should not fall into a pit, so the owner of the pit should not be obligated to pay. But if a shar that is deaf or not normal, or of a katan, or a young calf who's not familiar, only then are you obligated chayev. But a regular shar falling into the pit, you're not obligated to pay because that shar should have been more aware and should not have fallen into the pit. Bain or bas, if a young kid falls into, or a daughter, now normally a shar is not obligated if a human falls in. Not only any human that falls in, because any human knows not to fall into a pit, but even a little kid that falls into a pit, Eved or Yama, a slave or a maid, which technically are humans, but maybe I would think you're obligated to pay to the owner of the slave, to the owner of the maid. Potter, you're potter to pay. Okay, so this is a lot of different halachas in the Mishnah, and we're going to discuss each and every one of them at this moment. So the Gemara continues. Verishan, we say the first one who covered it has, and then the second one found it uncovered. Only the second one is obligated to pay. Says the Gemara, Verishan ad emes miftar. How long will you exempt the first one? I mean, he's still a partner in digging this pit. Rav says, the amount of time that he could have known that he could come back and see that it is uncovered. Since both of them will know that it's uncovered, then he reverts back to his responsibility if any damages happen to the pit. Shmuel says, he necessarily does not have to come back. Let's say he comes back every 5 days. But Rabbi Shmuel says that if during that time somebody come and notified him, right, so then he's obligated is in his share of the damages, and we don't put the whole onus on damages on the second one because he was already notified that the pit is uncovered. Rabbi Yochanan says he should be notified. But it's not enough. He still has to have time. He should hire workers, handymen, if he had enough time to hire people to cover the pit. If there was enough time, let's say that he notified a day, and then he had an extra day to hire handy people to cover it. And he didn't. So then the first guy still joins the responsibility with the second person. Now the Gemara says, Kiso Karov, and if you made a proper covering and an ox or a donkey fell in and died, you're potter. So the Gemara asks the obvious question, if you covered it properly, then how did a donkey and an ox fall in? You covered it properly. It's talking about that it rotted from underneath. Let's say termites came, rotted the cover, you weren't aware of it, and therefore that's how the donkey or ox fell into the pit. But you did your job, so therefore you're potter. So the Gemara asks a question. A person made the cover, and it had the strength to withstand the weight of oxen. But it didn't have enough strength to withstand the weight of heavy camels. Also, and camels came and made the cover shaky. It loosened the cover, so therefore it became vulnerable. Also, and then oxen came and stepped on that cover and fell through to the pit. What's the obligation? What's the obligation of the owner of the pit? Amri. So the yeshiva boys tried to figure out this question. Hey Chidami, what is the scenario over here? If there was camels around here, so then the fact that he made a cover that could not withstand the weight of camels, Pesheahu, he's very negligent. So therefore, he's obligated to pay. If there was no camels here, so Anasuf, just because a camel, he made it appropriate for oxen. And some crazy guy brought a camel there and stepped on his cover, so you can't fault the owner of the pit. It's not his fault. And says the Gemara like Tzricha, this is the question. The Asu, the Prakim. Camels come once in a while. It's not often that they come onto the street. Mi Amrina and keeping the Asu the Prakim, since they come once in a while, still, Pesheahu, the owner of the pit, should have made a cover that could withstand the weight of animals, withstand the weight of a camel. It should have crossed his mind that a camel may come, and therefore he has to make a cover that's very, very strong that could withstand the weight of a camel. Or you can say, give me the Hashem Yisleka, since it's not here right now. So we don't fault him for not thinking about maybe a camel will come. So honestly, it's not his fault. So the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here. Kiso, Karo, Mishnah says you covered it appropriately. If enough, and the ox and a donkey fell in there, mace, potter. That's what our Mishnah said. So, hey, Chedamik, what's our Mishnah teaching you? You made it such a perfect cover that it could withstand the weight of oxen and camels. Then how did an ox fall into that pit? What's the explanation of the Mishnah? Elalav, it must be karoi lishvarm. You made it weight worthy for an ox. You go to Amid Beis, v'loy karoi legmalim, and therefore it cannot withstand the weight of a camel. If there's camels around, my potter, why are you potter? Pasheyahu. You're a pasheya. It's not if eat shchicha gemalim, my potter pasheyahu. You're a pasheya. If camels are not around, pshita. It's simple. Honor. You're an einus. It's not your fault. Just so, therefore, what's our Mishnah talking about? Elalav, our Mishnah is talking about the asiyish the prokim, that camels come around once in a while. Va'asa gemalim baru, and camels came and loosened this cover. Va'asa sharim, and therefore when oxen walked on this cover unafalbe, and they fell in it. Uktani, and the Mishnah says, Potter, you're Potter. So that's exactly our question, is the scenario that the Mishnah is talking about. And the Mishnah says, you're Potter. Alma, keeping the Hashaleka, since there's no camels around right now, and you made a cover to withstand the weight of an ox, you did your job. So honestly, it's not your fault. So that's perfect, clear cut on how you could learn our Mishnah to answer your question. Answer the Gemara, Amri, I will tell you, not so. You made it appropriate. You made it such a perfect cover that it could withstand the weight of oxen, it could withstand the weight of a camel. And your question was, how did the ox fall in there? If you made it so good, then how did an ox fall into the pit? Like we said before, Baba Bachana said that it rotted from the inside, and therefore maybe termites came, and therefore that's how a ox, and you weren't aware of it, an ox fell in there, so you're not obligated, the Balabar is not obligated to pay. Tashma, come in here, like you so from the end of the Mishnah, you can see the opposite. If you didn't do a proper covering and an ox or a donkey fell and died, chayiv, you're obligated to pay. Again, hey Chedami, what's the Mishnah talking about? You didn't make any good cover. You made like a plastic cheapy cover, cardboard cover. Pshita, of course you're obligated to pay. Does our Mishnah need to tell you that you're obligated to pay? The guy made a flimsy cover. Our Mishnah must be talking about he made it worthy for an ox, but wasn't weight worthy for a camel. Hey Chedami, what's the case? If the camels, it's a place where camels come back and forth. Certainly, you're negligent. You should have made it weight worthy for a camel. If it's not common that camels come there, so it's not your fault. Elalav, it must be dasin and prokim. The Mishnah is talking about a case where it comes once in a while. A camel, and a camel came and loosened the cover that you made, the Balabar made. And the oxen came and fell there, ukutani, and nevertheless the Mishnah says, Chayev, that is the Chiddush of the Mishnah. Alma, sin. So we see from this part of the Mishnah, came in the Asa de Prakim, since camels come once in a while, and you made only a cover that could withstand the weight of an ox, but not withstand the weight of a camel. Your negligence. You should have thought about it. You should have thought about it and made a weight worthy. You should have made a cover that could withstand a camel. And says the Gemara, you made a cover that could be worthy for an ox, but not worthy for a camel. And camels were around, and so therefore you were negligent. Then your question is, what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? Obviously, you're obligated to pay. You're negligent. So the Gemara says, "I did the nasav reisha kisah karo, nasav sefer namen like kisah karo." Since the beginning of the Mishnah, it has to teach you a novel case where you cover it appropriately. So the sefer also teaches you something of like kisah karo, which even though it's an obvious case, if you didn't make it weight worthy for a camel, and there's shchicha gemalim, you're obligated to pay. We're not going to be bothered that the Mishnah and the end of the Mishnah has no chiddush, but you still don't have a proof to your answer to your question, and that the Gemara leaves that. Ike de Amre, the Gemara continues, Hanami Bade Lemibayala. We're not going to, our original question, our original shaila, that wasn't really a question. Keeping the asle prokim, pesheyahu, the boilele asuki daiti. Since if you know that camels come once in a while and you don't make it camel worthy, then you're considered negligent. Let me ask you a question. Hachihu. This is my question. You made a cover that's weight worthy for an ox, but not for a camel. Ushchichem gmal. And camels are there. So you made the wrong type of cover. But what happened was, it's so right away you're tchilosei b'pshia. You made a pshia. You made a negligence. But the reason why the animal fell the inside is because of oinus, not your fault. It rotted from the inside. Mahu, what's the din? I'm reading, what do we say? It's just because, since you're negligent because of the camels, we're going to hold you negligent even if it rotted on the inside. Or we will not say migoy. Because you're negligent here, automatically we're going to apply negligence over there. At the end of the day, the reason why the camel fell into the pit is because it rotted from the inside. So Tashma, come in here. So our Mishnah says you made a proper covering, and an ox and a donkey fell and then died, you're potter. Rabbi Yitzchak explained it rotted from the inside. Hey, what's the case? You made a proper cover of itli mitoich, and then it rotted. Pshita the potter. But you did the right thing. You made a cover that could withstand even a camel, and then it rotted. Of course, you potter. Elalav. The Mishnah is a novel, teaching you something novel. You made it worthy for an ox, but not worthy for a camel. And camels come around, and it rotted from the inside. So you were pesheya, tchilas pesheya, and it ended up happening in oinus, v'ketani pata. Almost we see, lo yamrin, we don't say that we'll hold you liable just because you're negligent, you didn't put a proper cover. We're going to hold you liable even if rotted from the inside. Answers the Gemara, loy, not true. You made a proper covering for camels also. And it rotted from the inside. If it rotted from the inside, then what do you fault the owner of the pit? And the Gemara, that's the novel. That we would fault the owner of the pit because once in a while he should step onto his cover to see if it's still working. And since he didn't check it often, he didn't do an inspection, so we're going to hold him liable. So Kamash Malan, that no, once you cover that pit, and I guess there's no inspections. Once you cover a pit and it's a proper cover, if it so happens that it rotted from the inside of the pit and not from the outside, so he couldn't tell by just passing by, we will not hold him liable. Taushma, come in here. Like so, Krov and Afal Sefer Sharach Hamar. Umeis, Chayev, hey Chedami. What's that talking about? If you did this, the end of the Mishnah. You didn't make a proper. You just put a cardboard piece on the pit. Of course. Do I need to tell you that you're obligated to pay? Of course. Elalav. It must be you made it worthy for oxen, but not worthy for camels. If there's camels around Peshehu, you're negligent. So if there's no camels around, so if somebody happened to bring a camel, that's not your fault. So why are you obligated to pay? Alma, it must be the case is that there were camels, and you just only made it worthy for an ox. But nevertheless, it rotted from the inside, which is our question. And the end happened. It wasn't your fault. And the Mishnah says you're obligated to pay. Alma Amrinim, we extended they're just since you're negligent because of the camel part. So if it ended up that the ox fell into the pit because it rotted, it's still your fault. We're going to hold you liable, negligent. Says Amri, not so, not so fast. Really, he made it worthy for an ox and not worthy for a camel. And camels walk around. It's common to have camels in that area. And a camel came and made it wobbly, and therefore an ox that followed onto the cover fell through. And you're going to ask me a question. Of course, you're Peshayahu. So it's obvious. So what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? I didn't say Reisha Kiso Kro, now say Sefer Namiloi Kiso. Since the beginning of the Mishnah gives you a case if you make a proper cover, so the Sefer, even though there's no chiddush of the Mishnah, there's no novel idea of the Mishnah, will give you a case where you did not make a proper covering. Finally, the Gemara answers the question. Toshma, come in here. A regular ox, a regular cheresh, shoiten, cotton, suma, all these handicapped oxen fell into the pit, or a regular ox fell and it fell at night. This is important. We didn't see this in the Mishnah, but if a regular ox fell into the pit and you can't fault the ox because you couldn't see the pit, then the owner of the pit is chayav to pay. If it's a normal ox and it's walking during the day, potter, the owner of the ox is not obligated to pay. Why? Nema, let us say, so why don't we say that since you made a balabar, made a pit, that certainly he's negligent if a non-normal animal falls there, he's chayav to pay. But nevertheless, if a normal animal falls there, you're not obligated to pay. So we don't extend your negligence. Your negligence is limited to where you're negligent. So elalav shmamina. So we can say the proof. We don't say we don't extend your negligence. Shmamina, it's a proof. So in our case, a guy made a flimsy, not worthy cover for an ox. Let's say he made a flimsy cover, and what happened was, in other words, he made a flimsy cover that eventually got compromised because camels walked over it. And the reason why the ox fell into the pit is because it rotted from the inside. So it was a tchilase b'pshia. And the reason why the ox fell into the pit is because of an inus, not his fault. We're not going to extend the liability to the owner of the pit. And in this case, he will not be obligated to pay. So ends Masechta Bava Kamma Daf Mem Bava.